She was scrubbing the floor of the main lobby when the company president heard her speaking Russian, English, and German with an impressive fluency. What happened next left everyone stunned. Almost no one ever noticed the cleaning staff at Zenith Global Logistics, not out of malice, but simply out of habit. They would come in after hours, pushing carts, changing trash bags, wiping down conference tables, fading into the background like elevator music. It was a Monday morning in the bustle of downtown Chicago. The company's main lobby vibrated with the sounds of shoes tapping across the polished floor, people typing on their phones, talking about deadlines, clutching their coffee cups as if all the answers were hidden in the steam. Nathan Carter, the president of Zenith, was halfway along his walk from the parking garage to the executive floor on the 20th story when he heard a voice, but not just any voice. Fluent, clear, sliding through a language he hadn't heard with that kind of precision since a tense negotiation with partners in Moscow. Russian. It made him stop in place, not because it was Russian, but because of who was speaking. He looked around, thinking maybe one of the international sales reps had arrived early, but then he saw her, a woman in the teal cleaning uniform, her short, curly hair tied back in a small ponytail, standing by the digital information panel in the lobby. She was in the middle of a conversation with an older man in a navy blue blazer and thick-rimmed glasses, who looked confused and relieved at the same time. She gestured calmly, her voice warm and steady, showing him the way to the elevators in Russian. Nathan narrowed his eyes. He had seen her before, passing quietly through the halls after late meetings. Always polite, always silent, never made eye contact unless someone spoke to her first. He didn't even know her name. But there she was, translating and explaining the building's logistics effortlessly in a language most Americans could barely pronounce. He took a slow step forward. As he approached, she finished the conversation in Russian and turned to a delivery guy holding a clipboard. "You can leave it here at the reception, please," she said, switching to flawless English. The delivery guy blinked. "Oh, thank you." Then, just as naturally, she turned to a supplier standing nearby, studying a stack of mislabeled boxes. "Diese Konferenzraum B ist auf der anderen Seite," she informed him in German, pointing with a slight smile. "The conference room B is on the other side, sir." Nathan's jaw tightened, not in anger, but something else, something heavier, a pang of guilt. He had worked in global logistics for more than 2 decades, led international expansions, hired translators, set up intercultural training programs. And there, in his own building, the most linguistically talented person he'd encountered in months, had, until recently, been scrubbing bathrooms just a few floors below. Intercultural, and there in his own building, the most linguistically talented person he had encountered in months had, until recently, been cleaning bathrooms just 2 floors below. He stepped forward, more curious than authoritative. "Excuse me," he said. She turned to him, surprised but composed. "Yes, Mr. Carter." He gave her a slight smile. "That was Russian, right?" "Yes, sir." "And you speak it fluently?" "Yes, and English, German." She nodded. "Also French, Japanese, Italian, Arabic, and I can communicate fairly well in ASL. Oh, and I read Latin, but I don't really count that one." He blinked. "You're telling me you speak 9 languages, including your native Spanish?" "Yes, sir." There was no pride in her tone, no arrogance, just the plain truth, clear as a shaft of light. He looked at her for a moment, trying to process the fact that a cleaning staff worker in his building, a woman who had quietly scrubbed the floors night after night, was a kind of sleepwalking polymath. "What's your name?" he finally asked. "Daniela Morales." "Ms. Morales, are you free for a few minutes?" Her eyebrow arched slightly. "Right now, yes. I'd like to have a word with you in my office." He noticed a flicker of hesitation, not exactly fear, but that automatic reflex of someone used to being ignored or underestimated. She nodded slowly. "All right." He pressed the elevator button and held the door open for her to step inside. In the elevator, silence settled between them for a moment. "I've worked here for 13 years, she said suddenly as they ascended to the executive floor. He turned to her. "I never thought I'd be invited upstairs." He gave a small, restrained smile. You might be surprised how fast things can change. But he had no idea just how much was about to change, for her and for him. The elevator chimed. Daniela stepped out first, her shoes silent against the polished wooden floor of the executive corridor, which smelled like a mix of citrus and leather, the scent of money, if you had to call it something. Nathan's assistant looked up, eyes wide with surprise at the sight of Daniela at his side. He didn't explain. He just nodded for her to let them pass. Once inside the glass-walled office, he gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Please, have a seat." She sat down carefully, folding her hands in her lap, her eyes slowly scanning the room. She wasn't impressed, just observant. A large world map hung behind him, each country marked with colored pins. On the side table sat a tray with espresso cups, a photo of his two daughters, and a dusty award from a logistics conference in Brussels. Nathan sat across from her, leaning forward slightly. "Ms. Morales, I'm going to be honest. I didn't expect to be having this conversation today." She gave a small nod, her posture still steady, her face unreadable. "But I just heard you switch between 3 languages, like you were flipping channels on a TV. And I need to understand, how does someone like you end up here, cleaning the floors?" For a moment, she didn't answer. Her eyes drifted to the window, then back to him. "Do you have time for the truth?" "I wouldn't have asked if I didn't." She exhaled. "All right then." She rubbed her palms together as if warming up the words. "I was born in a small town in southern Arizona. I'm an only child. My father was a mechanic, my mother a nursing assistant. They didn't have much, but they worked hard. They valued education like it was a religion. I earned a full scholarship to the University of Arizona. I studied languages. I was halfway through my master's when my mother got sick." She paused. "I moved back home to take care of her. Then my father passed away, a stroke, 6 months later. Everything fell apart after that." She tilted her head slightly, like she was rewinding memories before speaking them aloud. "I had a daughter. No money. No partner who stuck around. So I worked wherever I could. Grocery stores, nursing homes, temp jobs, until a supervisor from the cleaning staff here offered me the night shift. It let me pick up my daughter from school and pay the electric bill. That's how I ended up here." Nathan watched her without blinking, just listening. "But the languages, I never stopped learning. I borrowed books, listened to recordings, read newspapers in different languages, just to stay sharp. It's what I do. It's the only thing that makes me feel like I still matter." Her voice didn't waver. It wasn't rehearsed or poetic, just simple. "Most people never asked," she added. "They saw the uniform and assumed." That last word hung in the air. Assumed. Nathan leaned back in his chair, the weight of her story settling in his chest like a stone. She cleared her throat. "Look, Mr. Carter, I'm not saying this to make anyone feel bad. I'm not bitter. Life happened. I did what I had to do, and I still do. You asked, and that's the answer." He let out his breath slowly. Daniela Morales was brilliant. That was obvious now. But she wasn't asking for pity or even charity. She was offering the truth, plain and clear and a little heartbreaking. "Have you ever thought about doing something else?" he asked. She shrugged. "Sometimes. But it's hard to dream when the rent is overdue." Silence fell again, but it felt different now. Thicker, filled with something unspoken but powerful. Nathan picked up his notepad and scribbled a few lines. "What are you writing?" she asked, her voice still calm but a little curious now. He looked up at her. "Ideas." But one idea in particular was already taking shape in his mind, and it wasn't a small one. The conversation stayed with him all day. Even during budget reviews and calls with suppliers, Nathan Carter's thoughts kept drifting back to that morning, to Daniela Morales, her steady voice, and the quiet way she had listed so many languages as if they were nothing. That kind of fluency didn't just happen. It took years of discipline, curiosity, and passion. Around 3:45 p.m., he left the executive floor and took the elevator down to the building's service level. He needed to see something for himself. Downstairs, the air was warmer. The walls were a dingy white, scuffed by carts and boots. He passed maintenance crews, break rooms, stacks of water jugs, and finally reached the supply room for the cleaning staff. He spotted Daniela through the open door, restocking microfiber cloths on a metal shelf. "May I bother you again?" he asked, stepping inside. She turned, a little startled. "You came down here?" He smiled. "I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation. Listen, I have a favor to ask." She wiped her hands on her uniform. "What kind of favor?" "There's a meeting upstairs. A group from our Hamburg office arrived early, and our translator canceled at the last minute. Could you help us out? She hesitated for only a second. German? Yes, I can help. Minutes later, they were in conference room 4C. Four German executives sat awkwardly, checking their phones. Daniela slipped in quietly and nodded to them, head, and began to speak in a smooth, confident German. Nathan watched as the entire room shifted, shoulders relaxed, eye contact grew stronger. She wasn't just translating, she was building a bridge, making people feel seen. When one of the visitors cracked a joke in German, Daniela responded with a laugh, and another joke that made everyone burst out laughing. Nathan didn't understand a word, but he understood the connection. After 20 minutes, the meeting ended. One of the executives turned to him and said in English, "She's better than anyone we've worked with this year. Where did you find her?" Nathan looked over at Daniela, who was already stacking empty cups on a tray. "Right here," he said. Back out in the hallway, he caught up to her. "Have you ever done professional translation before?" She shook her head. "I've just helped people in hospitals, government offices, things like that. No certificate, no time to study. My daughter needed me more." She hesitated, then added in a quieter voice, "And to be honest, I'm still learning the business side. I don't know all the corporate terms yet. Sometimes I have to write them down so I don't forget." Nathan nodded. "And where is she now?" "She's 26, a nurse in San Diego. She paid for college herself, stubborn like her mom." They both smiled, and for a moment, it didn't feel like CEO and janitor, just two people talking about life. They walked back down to the service level, where Daniela clocked back in. She still had 2 more floors to clean before her shift ended. But before she left, she said something that stayed with him. "I didn't do anything special today." He looked at her, eyebrows raised. "That's not how it seemed to me." She gave a small smile and walked away, but as she turned the corner, she felt a flicker of doubt, wondering if she'd really done as well as everyone seemed to think, or if it had just looked that way from the outside. That night, Nathan sat in his car for a long time before driving home. He thought about everything: the pressure to grow the company, the meetings with investors, the endless discussions about diversity, and overlooked talent. All this time, they had been searching outside, recruiting globally, trying to find new blood. But sometimes the gold is already in your own backyard. And when you realize that, the real question becomes what you're going to do about it. The next morning, Daniela's badge beeped at the wrong time. She had just finished cleaning the east lobby, when her supervisor, Marcus, tapped her shoulder, wearing an expression that wasn't exactly irritated, but wasn't normal either. "Hey, Daniela, Mr. Carter asked to see you again." She blinked. "Did I do something wrong?" Marcus shook his head. He didn't say. "Just told me to bring you upstairs." She wiped her hands on a towel and followed the same path she had walked the day before. Only this time, everyone in the building seemed to notice her. People she passed looked up. Some whispered. One of the receptionists even gave her a polite smile, as if she knew something Daniela didn't. When she stepped into the executive suite, Nathan was standing near the window, drinking black coffee and staring at the city skyline. "Come in," he said without turning around. She stood quietly by the door until he looked over at her. "I've been thinking," he said, setting his mug in a coaster, "about wasted talent. How many people never get a chance, not because they aren't good enough, but because no one ever looks twice?" Daniela said nothing. She didn't trust easy compliments. She had seen too many people talk big and do very little, and part of her still wondered if he'd made a mistake. "I want to create a new position," he continued. "One that didn't exist before. Something this company desperately needs, even if we didn't realize it until now." She frowned slightly. "For what?" "Cultural liaison for international affairs. Someone who can speak the languages, read between the lines, handle visitors, vendors, documents, all the global touch points we keep stumbling over." Her mouth fell open, but no sound came out. "You're qualified, probably more than most people on our leadership team, honestly. And you've already proven you can handle it with grace, patience, and intelligence." She looked at him, her eyes narrowing just a little. "Is this serious?" "As serious as it gets. I don't have a college degree. You have something better: life experience, commit, and fluency in more languages than I can count. Do you really think I care about a piece of paper? She shifted her weight, still uncertain. And what if I mess this up? She asked quietly. He looked directly at her. Why me? Because I watched you solve 3 problems in 3 languages before 9 o'clock yesterday morning. And because I'm tired of walking past people like you, people doing twice the work for half the credit. Daniela crossed her arms. You know what people are going to say. I don't care. She looked at him for a long moment, then let out a slow sigh. I've never had an office job, she said, never held a title. You'll learn fast. I don't have a wardrobe for this kind of thing. I'll ask HR to approve a clothing allowance. She gave a dry little laugh. You've thought of everything, huh? I'm trying. A long pause settled between them. Then Daniela asked quietly, and my shift, downstairs, who's going to replace me? Nathan smiled. We'll find someone, but no one can really replace you, not for a long time. Neither of them spoke. She looked down at her hands, then back at him. Are you sure this isn't some kind of favor? He shook his head. This is recognition, more than deserved. She bit her lip, her eyes shining, but she blinked the tears away before they fell. All right then, she said, her voice steady. Let's see what I can do. But as she turned toward the door, her heart beat faster than she wanted to admit. For all her confidence, she had no idea if she could keep up with people who'd been in these rooms their whole careers. She wondered if she'd embarrass herself by asking questions everyone else already knew the answers to. He reached out his hand. She shook it. It wasn't just a handshake, it was history being rewritten. But what neither of them expected was how everyone else in the building would react. By Wednesday, the news had traveled faster than the elevators. Daniela Morales, the overnight cleaning woman, had been promoted to an executive-level role. Nobody knew the full story. Just rumors that she spoke a bunch of languages, that the president himself had chosen her, that maybe she had some kind of secret past. Maybe she'd worked for the government, maybe she was undercover. The gossip bounced from cubicle to cubicle, conference room to conference room. Some people were curious. Others smiled and said, good for her. But not everyone was applauding. In the break room, 2 marketing assistants leaned over their salads. I'm just saying. One of them whispered, I have a master's in international business, and I've been waiting for a promotion for 2 years. This woman was scrubbing toilets last week. Her friend shrugged. Maybe she knows something we don't. Oh, please, it's Nathan trying to look progressive. Fill a quota. That same energy seeped into boardrooms and Slack messages, a quiet resentment mixed with confusion. People weren't used to promotions coming from outside the usual corporate ladder. Daniela felt it the second she stepped into her new office on the 12th floor. It was modest, just a desk, a plant, and a computer she hadn't even touched yet. But to her, it felt like another planet. She set her bag down and tried to remember where HR said the login instructions were. For a moment, she wished she could call someone to walk her through it, but she didn't want to give them another reason to think she didn't belong. When HR finished her orientation, she asked if she could keep her night shift uniform, not to wear, just to remember. That afternoon, she met with Victor, the international operations manager. He came in holding a clipboard, eyes narrowed. He didn't shake her hand. He didn't sit down. So you're the new liaison, he said, like it was a joke wrapped in politeness. Daniela looked up at him. That's what I'm told. You have experience in corporate environments? She smiled, only on the outside, looking in. He didn't smile back. I've got reports from Italy, contracts from our partners in Dubai, and a major mess with suppliers in Tokyo. Think you can handle it? She stood up. Her palms were damp, but she kept her voice steady. I'll need a few hours to review, but yes. Victor dropped the folder on her desk and walked out. Later that evening, Nathan stopped by her office. How was your first day? She let out a breath, leaning back in her chair. I've had worse, he smiled. Victor gave you a hard time. He doesn't scare me, I figured. She paused, then added, Can I ask you something? Anything. Why now? Why me? You could have just given me a bonus and moved on. He leaned against the doorframe. Because I saw myself in you. She raised an eyebrow. You used to be a janitor? No. But I was overlooked plenty. I didn't come from money either. My dad fixed cars in a little town no one remembers. I worked 3 jobs during college. People thought I didn't belong in rooms like this. Daniela nodded slowly. And now you're the one who decides who gets in. He nodded back. Exactly. There was a moment of silence before Daniela looked down at the file on her desk. I'll be honest, I'm nervous. Good, it means you care. She looked, there are going to be people who hate this. They'll get over it, or they won't. Either way, we're moving forward. Nathan straightened up. You have a story, Daniela, a real story, and now you have a platform. Then he turned to leave. As the door closed behind him, Daniela looked around her office. She remembered the years she'd cried in bathroom stalls during lunch breaks, the nights she'd come home with her feet aching, barely enough energy left to warm up a can of soup, the birthdays she missed, the promotions she'd watched go to people who wouldn't even say good morning. She opened the top drawer of her desk and placed her old cleaning badge inside, not to forget, but to remember exactly what it took to get here. But this story wasn't just hers anymore, and the spotlight was about to get a lot brighter. By the end of the week, the plaque with Daniela Morales' name was mounted outside her office door. Black letters on brushed steel. Daniela Morales, Cultural Liaison, International Affairs. It looked official, clean, permanent. The news spread formally this time. The company-wide email hit inboxes Friday morning, sent by Nathan himself. It was short, clear, and carried weight. He explained her role, her experience, and, most importantly, her value. He didn't frame it as charity or a feel-good gesture. He made it clear she was the best person for the job. Period. But that didn't stop the chatter. Some managers muttered under their breath. Others softened when they saw her in action. She led conversations with international clients better than any translation software. She fixed mistakes in old contracts that had cost the company money for years. And she never showed off. She just worked, quietly, efficiently, better than anyone expected. On Monday, Daniela was called into a meeting with a delegation from Morocco. The company's expansion in North Africa had been stalled for months due to miscommunication and mistrust. She walked into the room in a soft beige blazer, took her seat at the table, and introduced herself in fluent Moroccan Arabic. The room changed. You could feel it. People leaned in to listen, because when someone speaks your language, you don't just hear words, you hear respect. After the meeting, one of the Moroccan partners came up to her privately. He touched his chest gently, a traditional gesture of gratitude. No one has ever done this for us, he said. Not in our language, not like this. Daniela nodded. You matter, that's all. Midweek, Nathan made another move. He renamed the company's main training room, the place where every new hire came for orientation and where mid-level managers held workshops. The old sign was taken down. In its place, Daniela Morales Room. No big announcement, no party. Just a simple plaque, and a change that meant more than flowers or cake ever could. Later that afternoon, Nathan stood. Outside the room, Nathan stood watching a new group of interns walk in. He heard one of them whisper, "Who's Daniela Morales?" A senior employee replied, "She's someone who reminded this place that greatness doesn't always come in a suit and tie." That same day, Daniela found a sealed envelope on her desk with no sender, just her name printed neatly in block letters. Inside was a note. "I used to think I'd be invisible forever, but today I felt a little taller because of you. Thank you." No signature. Just proof that people were watching, people who needed to see what was possible. Daniela stood there, looking at the words, her throat tight. She didn't cry. She didn't need to, because that was the moment she realized this wasn't just a job, it was a door. But not every door stays open without a fight, and someone was already planning to push back. The backlash didn't take long to show up. On Thursday night, Daniela was called into a meeting, not by Nathan, but by someone higher up. Eleanor Price, a senior board director who'd flown in from Washington, D.C. She'd been with the company since the 90s, impeccable suits, an even sharper tongue. Daniela walked into the small conference room on the 17th floor, where Eleanor was waiting with a stack of papers and a cold stare. "Sit," she said, without looking up. Daniela sat. Eleanor tapped her pen twice. "Miss Morales, I've reviewed your file. You don't have a college degree, no prior corporate training, and no management certification." Daniela didn't flinch. "Correct." Eleanor folded her hands. "You were a janitor here 3 weeks ago." "I was." She leaned back in her chair. Help me understand how someone with your background is now handling high-level international affairs. Daniela held her gaze. Because I speak the languages, I understand the cultures. I've already fixed 2 supplier contracts and cleared a 3-month delay in our Morocco agreement. I also helped secure a verbal deal with our partners in Japan that legal is finalizing next week. Eleanor pursed her lips. You think this company should be run on instinct and charm? Daniela smiled faintly. No, ma'am. I think it should be run on results. Eleanor blinked. It was the first time Daniela had seen her hesitate. I don't need to be liked, Daniela added, but I do need to be useful, and I am. Eleanor stood and closed the folder slowly. You're a gamble. I'm used to that, Daniela said quietly. My whole life has been one. When the meeting ended, Daniela didn't go back to her office right away. She stepped out of the building and sat on a bench across the street, staring at the glass tower where she worked now. For years, she'd walked past that building wearing the same uniform, carrying cleaning supplies, wondering if anyone saw her. Now everyone saw her, and some didn't like it. She picked up her phone and called her daughter. Hi, Mom, her daughter answered. Everything okay? Daniela hesitated, then nodded to herself. Yes, I just needed to hear your voice. You sure? I'm sure. They talked for a few minutes, mostly about nothing, shopping, her daughter's dog, a new movie she wanted to see. But just hearing her laugh settled something in Daniela's chest. After they hung up, she sat in silence for a moment, then stood, crossed the street, and took the elevator back up to her floor. The next morning, word of the meeting with Eleanor Price somehow spread, and to everyone's surprise, Daniela didn't back down. She showed up early, spoke up in a team meeting, answered a call with the Germany office without a translator. Calm, sharp, unshaken. That same day, a handwritten note appeared on the whiteboard outside her office. We see you. No name. Just 3 words that meant everything. In the weeks that followed, something strange happened. People started coming to her, not just for translation, but for advice, guidance, trust. She became the person everyone turned to before pitching an idea. She would sit with interns and give them tips before big presentations, and she never looked down on anyone. One of the interns, a shy young man named Kenny, asked her, "How did you learn all those languages?" She smiled. "1 word at a time, the same way you will." Daniela wasn't just doing her job. She was changing the culture. One afternoon, Nathan joined her for coffee in the break room. I've been hearing good things, he said. She took a sip from her cup. I've been trying to ignore the bad ones. You're making noise. She looked at him. That's good? He smiled. Around here, it means you're doing something right. They were quiet for a moment. You know, he added, I've been thinking about starting a training program for internal talent, especially people working in non-administrative roles. There are probably more Danielas in this building, she nodded. There are. They just haven't been seen yet. He looked at her. Would you help me build it? She smiled. I already started in my head. By the end of the month, the pilot program launched, a new initiative called Inner Voice, designed to give employees in every department access to language training, leadership mentoring, and visibility across divisions. It was Daniela's idea, and it caught fire. Eventually, she was invited to speak at a leadership conference in Denver, where she told her story, not as an inspirational fable, but as a hard truth. I was never just a janitor, she said to the audience. I was fluent, I was capable, I was ready, but nobody ever looked long enough to see it. So the next time you pass someone without a fancy title, ask yourself what you're really missing. The room fell silent and then rose in a standing ovation. On her way out, a young man came up to her, tears in his eyes. My mom is a housekeeper, he said, and she speaks 5 languages. I used to be embarrassed to tell people that. Daniela touched his arm gently. Never be ashamed of where you come from. The only thing to be ashamed of is staying blind to brilliance. She walked out of that building taller than she had ever been in her life. Not because of the applause, not because of the promotion, but because she hadn't changed who she was to fit the role. She brought herself, every layer of her story, with her. And that made all the difference. Never assume you know someone's worth based on what they wear, where they work, or what their resume says. Talent has no dress code. Intelligence doesn't need permission. And brilliance can walk right past you wearing a badge and holding a mop. If you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or ignored, keep going. The right person will see you. And when that happens, don't be afraid to take your place at the table. Better yet, bring a few more chairs with you. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think, you already know what to do. Leave a big like so I know you enjoyed it. Share it with everyone who needs to hear this message of hope and recognition. Let's spread this positivity. And most importantly, subscribe here on the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss any of the next stories that will help you believe that yes, the world can be a place with more opportunities for those who truly deserve them.